Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started? Perhaps there'll be a few more who walk in after lunch. Again, just mention that the second half of this is much more of a talk with all of us, so if you'd like to come up front at that point, that would be great. If not, maybe we'll give you back a little bit of time towards the end of this session. Anyway, my name is Tyler Walters. I'm the Dean of University Libraries at Virginia Tech, and this session is Academic Libraries, how do we put it all together, become agile, and adapt. So I was asked if I could do a session on kind of, change management, change in libraries. So of course I said I could do that. And of course the answer to my question, if you read the description, my initial or starting answer to that is it's all about leadership. Of course that's what you're going to get from me. I have a PhD in managerial leadership, so it's always a leadership issue where I'm concerned. Of course there are no easy answers to this problem, right? It's kind of the big thing that we all have to be working on. So I kind of like to start with this, what do we really do as libraries? And I think everybody has I think we all share a very core understanding of what we do as libraries. And then there's a lot of emerging things that are going on that relate to that core. So I know when I'm asked on campus, what are we doing? I get a lot of comments from faculty, although I think they're lessening now, but a lot of comments about, gee, what are libraries really going to do in the future? And I kind of comment, well, I think we really do know what we're going to be doing because we're beginning to do it now, and we'll be doing more of what we're doing now later on. So my one quick line around what do libraries really do these days, I tell people, well, we enhance teaching, learning, and research through data, information, and knowledge. We're data, information, knowledge people. That's what we do. We're professionals in these areas. And I usually get a question like, well, what's knowledge? It's such an amorphous word, and we try to relate it to, in that sense, the teaching of literacies, right? So it's about know-how or skills and abilities and the things that we teach people so they learn more about how to do things with data and information going forward. So that's kind of how we describe knowledge. A couple of other ways that we've kind of described this. Now, this is kind of one of my favorite quotes. Those who've seen me talk before, I've used this quite a bit because it's about 10 years old now, but I just simply like it. Libraries are no longer grocery stores where students can go to pick up ingredients, but kitchens where they have the resources necessary to create a finished product. In other words, libraries kind of provide or have potential to provide everything from beginning to end of a academic project. Another way we kind of look at this is this notion of libraries support the full knowledge production process. Of course, we provide technologies. We might help you produce a product. We might reposit it and provide access to it, preserve it, disseminate it. But we have areas in libraries where we help students in particular kind of generate concepts and ideas around what they're going to do. In my library, we have a digital media studio where students come in with a course assignment and they're not too sure what to do and they need to design some sort of multimedia project. We have a studio in our library too called the Fusion Studio, which is specifically geared towards student projects. A group of students from a course can come in and work with a person that we have who has an advanced degree in education who works with them on kind of designing their projects, what they're going to do, and then learn more about how to use technologies, how to really engage in teamwork together. So again, I think we try to see this as we're really helping with the intellectual creation of materials and then that whole kind of life cycle of need going forward. So maybe that helps frame the discussion a little bit today. So I really like to start when we talk about, how are we going to be adaptive? How are we going to change? And change isn't a linear thing. We're static, we change, we're static again. We all know that's not really how it works. This is why I kind of like the term adaptive, because we need to be constantly adapting in some way, shape, or form to the external forces, the environment that we find ourselves in, our parent institutions, as well as the environment for our parent institutions. So we come back to this. What do we hear about? We hear about organizational culture. We hear that phrase used a great deal. It would be accurate, but I hear it a lot. I think in my years, it's like, well, we can't adjust that way because of the work culture. Our culture just won't allow us to do that. And what I've kind of noted over the years is somebody says a sentence like that and it's just kind of a conversation stopper. Nobody knows what to say really after that. So I like to try to delve a little bit deeper into that problem and what is culture. It's this tag that we throw out there, and again I think in a lot of ways stymies the conversation. So it's important to really understand that culture is, in this sense, work culture is the beliefs we hold as librarians about the way we go about doing our work. It's our path to work, it's our practices, it's our policies, it's just the ways we think about how we carry out our work. And it's really, in the end, if we're going to be adaptive, that's what we're trying to change over time. So there's simple little tactics that I've used. I mean, as simple as it might sound, and I'm sure some of you shake your head and just think, well, that's just not really gonna work. And of course, sometimes it doesn't. But I have been this firm believer in, if you tell yourself constantly, I can't do it, I can't fund that, I don't have the money, we can't do this or that, well, then you're going to be right. You're not going to ever have the opportunity to do anything different. So I do, as I work with people, I try to encourage them to think a little bit differently. Just be a little obstinate and stubborn about things, and tell yourself that whatever it is, we're going to find a way to do this, and to focus on that thought. And does that work all the time? Of course it does not work all the time. But I have been amazed over time, over the years, that when I kind of get obstinate and I really tell myself we're going to do this thing, and work with my management that we're going to do this thing, it is amazing how opportunities arise. Again, it could be a year, it could be 3 years, it could be 6 months, we don't know. But a lot of times opportunities arise because we simply hold open in our minds a chance for some kind of opportunity to come along. So I know it sounds silly, but I think there's some real truth to it. But I also, like I said, I also know if we just shut ourselves down and say, well, we just cannot do that, we're never going to be scanning our environment for looking for ways to get those things done. So again, how do we go about being adaptive and become an agile organization? Well, I just ran across this just a few days ago, so I thought I'd throw this out there in a book called The Expertise Economy by Kelly Palmer and David Blake. They cite a recent report done by by McKinsey & Company, a consulting firm, where they've interviewed I can't remember the exact number, but some hundreds of executives, CEO types, and 62% of them believe that they will need to either replace or retrain a quarter or more of their employees within the next 5 years. Now, before you say that doesn't apply to us, it applies to us. I think the numbers might be a little different perhaps, but higher ed, we are an industry in that sense. We provide services, and I think this, like I said, maybe the numbers would be a little different, but I think this concept applies to what we do as much as anything else. So given that this is the case, adaptive really means how is it that we're working with our employees, with our folks, and how are we helping to adopt new perspectives and build new skills going forward. So again, some of this is kind of simple, which is why I kind of want to have a conversation on the floor, and as soon as I get done with these slides, and hear from all of you. But I know in our work, we're trying to be creative in adapting and changing and doing the things we need to be doing that are new. We really have spent a lot of time really understanding, what is university policy around HR administration? What is university policy around finances and budget? And what can we do to solve problems? I have an excellent HR manager and an excellent budget officer, and I kind of look at them as their solution providers for me. They know that this doesn't really do us any good to read the policy back at ourselves or have someone in HR read it for us. We want to understand those policies, and we always work within those frameworks, but we need to know where the boundaries are and where are things that we can do. Money is a big part of it. Can we move money around? Can you add wages to a position and to augment a salary and change a position and do something new with it? Can you change open positions from staff to faculty? We're able to do that. We have position allocations that are identified as either staff or library faculty. We're able to change those as we need to. Can you convert term-based jobs that you hire kind of quote off the street into a regular ongoing position? Do you have a trailing spouse program to work with? Can you co-fund positions with people? Again, a lot of this is about the HR aspect of the work, and what can you do to bring in people you need. And of course, this applies to the people we have with us already, and how do we help them learn the things that we need them to be learning as we go forward. And again, one of my favorite lines is the bolded one there, that we have to remind ourselves that the easiest money to find is the money we've already got. And that line has helped me a lot over the years. Again, silly little line, sounds very academic in a lot of ways, but it has helped me to think about that instead of waiting for somebody, our provost, to fund things for us, and of course we have to do that sometimes. I ask for money every year, and and do get some from time to time. But it is this, we have to look at our budgets and realize that the easiest money for us to find is the money we've already got, and how are we going to use it. My library's budget is between 22 and 23 million a year, so we're always asking ourselves, okay, we've got 23 million a year, what are we doing with it? What's the most important things that we could be doing? And try to think a little more abstractly. Of course, those funds are sunken, right? They're 99% of it's in the collections and in the salaries. But again, we can refer to those as sunken costs. But another thing I think about a lot is, and kind of advise people, is think about how do we, if these are sunken costs, how do we unsink some of our sunken costs? Because if they're sunken costs and we feel like there's just nothing we can do, well, then we've already convinced ourselves there's nothing we can do. So there's really that attitude of going about how can we make some changes? How do we go about unsinking some of those sunken costs? And I'd say in my case, been very, very fortunate at Virginia Tech. These items on the bottom, can you do this, can you do that? We've been able to do all of these things. So that's been really great. Not everybody can do all these things. I'm kind of throwing a few bullets out there to say, is there some area of flexibility that you have kind of within your organization, within your college or university? Can you do one of these things, some of these things, anything at all? I think this also applies to when we're talking about the people end of it. Perhaps it's a focus on student assistance and trying to find new enterprising students with certain skills or interests and abilities and let them run a bit. The other aspect is we know when we start going through change and we have a lot of external forces coming at us, we know this is going to create stress or distress. So this is something else that we talk quite a bit about, is this notion of how do we go about managing distress. And this actually comes from a leadership author, Ron Heifetz, who one of his concepts is regulating distress. So this slide or two really comes from Heifetz's work. And we really do try and practice this. It's always allow for some employee discomfort. Distress comes from those external forces. If we're protecting people all the time, then there's not much stimulation to change. Now, I have to say, I'm probably saying this to myself more than I am to all of you, because by my nature, I'm a protector. I want people to succeed. I want the people to do well, and I want to do everything I possibly can to remove all that thorny underbrush so they don't get stabbed all the time and they can get their work done. But I have learned over time that it's not my first or second nature, but it's, let things lie for a bit. Let people feel the pinch of what's coming in our direction a little bit. Think of it like a rubber band. We're going to stretch ourselves a little bit, but we don't want to stretch ourselves so much that we snap and break. And I think as a manager and a leader, you definitely want to not let things stretch and snap and break, of course, but you want to think about, how's the real world, affecting us and our employees, and let it have some effect and impact. Also focus an awful lot on just talk in the library, hallway talk in meetings. What are we really discussing? And try to get a little bit more oriented towards talking about the future. Even when we hire new employees, there needs to be some amount of orientation to, here's the library, here's the building, here's the people, here's what we do today, of course. But we need to spend more time setting that tone very early about where we need to be going in the future. And hopefully in the not too distant future, like within the next 2 to 4 years, where do we want to be? Where are we trying to achieve? And talk more about that and just set that tone right away. So again, kind of that theme of, don't stomp out conflict too fast. I think as a leader, it's focus on those issues. It's really about helping to get those issues up on the table. I know in the libraries I've worked in, we're very good at, sitting quietly in a meeting, and I've seen this 100 million times in my libraries that I've worked in. I've been a staff archivist and librarian. I've been a department head. I've been an associate dean and now a dean. And I see it all the time where we sit very quietly in a meeting, then we walk out, and there's an awful lot of discussion the minute people walk through the threshold of that door and leave that meeting and talk. So that's fine, if that's the way it's going to be, but then use that as a way to go forward. I can tell you, I'm still amazed. I've been at Virginia Tech, I'm in my 8th year, and if I just walk around the halls, I can guarantee you somebody within 10 minutes will definitely stop me and bend my ear about something. And it's not always a bad thing. It can be a good thing. A lot of times it is. But I just have, that's all I have to do to just find out what's going on, is just kind of walk and, and I hear things. And if I were to hold a meeting and say, well, we need to talk about this issue, well, the room can kind of go quiet. So do what you need to do in your organization to find out what's really on people's minds. And then, of course, there's that old adage of you can lead the horse to water, but you can't make the horse drink. Now, I love horses, so equating librarians to horses in my mind is a good thing. It's not meant to be a bad thing. It's a good thing. But again, as leader, you can help employees see that today's practices, they're not necessarily etched in stone, that they were designed for a particular point in time in a context, and that these things were really great. But going forward, there might be, some changes that we need to make. The parameters have changed, the environment has changed, and help people see that that environment has changed. And I think also resist, again, as a leader, manager, resist telling people what to do. I do get plenty of that myself, drawing from my personal experience. You kind of help people see what's coming at us, and we need to make some changes. And it's like, well, what do you want us to do? Well, you need to figure that out. But let me help you if I can. But I try not. I've always been. There's always I think an opportunity or an attempt to kind of bait leaders into providing the answers. Well, let me tell you, we don't have all the answers, and I'm sure all of you don't either. And we want to kind of cultivate and build and develop our people so that they can look at a certain situation and start to make resolutions for themselves and paths to go forward. So I think it's really important. This last bullet is kind of one that I do tend to live. I try to think about, 2 to 4 years down the road, what is it that you're really trying to do? Much more than that time frame seems really long. I mean, there's plenty of universities that do 30-year, 20-year scenario plans. I think it's a great exercise to kind of free yourself of the current bounds around things. But I do feel like when it comes to real concrete shifts and steps and trying to be adaptive to something, we probably have a couple of years in most cases to make some sort of change at best. So we really want to think about that. And I know in my head, it's as soon as we get the budget set in July, my head's in the next fiscal year. So even when I'm talking to people, I have to kind of shift my brain and think about currently what's going on. And I tell people that all the time. I'm the person helping you think about next year and the year after. That's where I mentally live. So recalibrating the people component. What are you trying to achieve strategically in the next 3 years? Well, hire for that. So some of the things that we've done, we feel like they've been very hard, difficult decisions. But we do really focus a lot on the vacancies as they've occurred. We've had, we're a library of about 150 people. So a library this size, you do get some churn. We've had early retirement programs. We've had people finish degrees and move on. We've had new people come. We've actually, in my years, we've had some budget growth from the provost, so we've added some positions in that way as well. As well as when I started in 2011, it's right after the Great Recession, right? Our library was sitting on money, fearful we'd be returning it, and luckily we didn't, so we had money to hire. So for us, a lot of this strategy is, and I think it can apply pretty much anywhere to varying degrees, of course, but is what do you do when you have a vacancy? And again, this is the really hard decision. I know we rarely, I'd say maybe 1 time out of 5, we hire as is with the job description. 4 times out of 5, we try really, really hard to not do that. I tell all department heads, and I think they understand it now, but I tell folks that all positions are returned to the dean's office upon vacancy. So that's, they understand that. I try really hard to develop that culture that we're a library. We're not a collection of departments. And that we all work together, we collaborate, and we at times need to move resources to these strategic areas of importance as we go forward. Part of that in our particular environment, and I'm sure some of you can relate to this, but we've had 3 provosts in the last 4 years. After long-term stability of a provost, the provost who hired me had been there for 14 years in the position. So lots of change, people coming in and say, oh, we need to do this and we need to do that. And how does the library kind of react and respond to that? And by the way, we're not going to augment your budget. So it is what can we do? It's like we take vacancies and we do different things. Now this can be really difficult on your departments because we're saying, well, we're not going to do this, we're going to do that. again, it's not recognizing that, well, we have a current need, we have this current practice and approach, and there are times that we'll come along and say, well, we're just not going to worry about that so much. We're going to find a way to cover it, but we're going to shift this position to another department with another program. So I know there again, are we creating some distress on our own? Yeah, you bet, we are. But I think good people find ways to get things covered. And again, it's not, work hard at trying to convey the point though that, not rehiring that position in that one given department does not equate to your department or service is not important. That's not the case at all. It's important, but it's about where can we, if we had brand new resources today, if somebody wrote us a check, where would we put the money today? Well, that vacancy is a check. Where are we going to put it? We're not wedded to doing the same thing. And I think we've evolved to a point where I have department directors and assistant and associate deans, probably more times than not, when a vacancy occurs, they're coming to me now with ideas of what to do. So for me, I feel like that's the ultimate in success, is when, when the dean doesn't have to tell you what to do. You kind of figure it out. You have support to figure it out. So I think that's really helpful. And again, kind of this last bullet is important. I know that I and my colleagues, we spend a lot of time looking at one another's org charts. I do it. I'm as guilty as anybody. I want to know, I kind of understand what people are doing, and then I kind of get on the phone or send an email like, why are you doing it that way? But I've come to realize that it doesn't matter so much. Inside my library, I try to do a really silly Wizard of Oz type impression and just say, do not worry about those boxes and lines on the org chart. Do not look behind the curtain. Do not look at those things. They don't matter. Just work together, work across lines. And we try to talk about that we need as much organizational structure as possible to facilitate the work to be done, and then stop. No more structure. As little as we can possibly get away with. Now that's really hard. Have we been successful at that? Maybe not so much. Have we made improvements? Yes, we have. But I think it's an important item to recognize, is that the goal is not to get this beautiful org chart produced that you can look at or share with people. In fact, I do tell people when they look at our org chart, I'm glad when they email, and I'm glad when they call, because I have to tell them, well, you're looking at this at a period of time when we're really making some changes and shifts, and I'm going to tell you this org chart's going to look absolutely crazy. You're going to look at it like you're going to think we're nuts for what we're doing, but we're in the midst of changing resources as we have some vacancies. So again, this is a very fluid situation if you can make it that way, and each library I think is to varying degrees. Some can do this a lot, some can do this a little, some may not be able to do it at all, which would be unfortunate, but try to look for ways to do this. Again, where are our resources? The bulk of them are in our collections and in our people. So this is another one. We've hired an awful lot of people in various areas that are kind of in that middle bullet there. We have a position, and I'll have a colleague who will ask me about a position, and then the next thing they say is, well, your person doesn't have an MLS. Well, not if they're a computational research person. We have someone who specializes in data-driven research in the life sciences. She has a PhD in computational biology at Virginia Tech. And she loves helping people with their data from the platform of the library, because she tells people, I get to work with anybody and everybody across the university because I'm part of the library. If I'm in a department, I'm going to be restricted to that department or college to provide that help. So we've actually been experiencing this, other professionals, I think, taking on areas that are not traditional librarianship areas, and I think they really do like the platform of the library to provide service and help people. And I ran across so many folks who are really driven to do things with faculty and students on campus. It's really been a great experience for us. But it is something to get over. I have talked with colleagues, deans and directors of libraries, and they say, well, we've hired people we consider professionals, outside of the librarian rank in that sense, but we hire them with other backgrounds that are pertinent to the job at hand. And I usually get a comment about, oh, well, my HR division would never let me do that. Well, yeah, that's a problem, but it's what I suggest is go talk with your HR division and tell them what it is you're trying to achieve and see what they say. Again, I know this sounds really simple, But I know if I go to some of my HR team, my central HR team on campus, yeah, they might tell me, well, I wouldn't do that, or I wouldn't do this. But instead, here's what we're trying to achieve. Here's what we want to do. Help us use policy to be able to achieve this. And I know in my case, at the university I'm at, they actually support us in that. They don't stop us and tell us, oh, you can't do that. Once we tell them what it is we're trying to achieve and what we want to do, if they think there's going to be some sort of problem with process or policy, they're going to definitely tell us that, and we absolutely want to hear that. We want to be within, proper boundaries. But I think it really does take a village of professionals anymore to make a variety of types of academic libraries go. We don't need every one of these kinds of people. And again, this isn't a roadmap to anything in particular. I was just kind of laying out a laundry list of things. But we have a lot of different types of folks, particularly in our data services area. We have people with a lot of different kinds of backgrounds. But I would say this is, like the first bullet says, this is actually something we're used to doing. Libraries have always had business personnel, HR people, marketers perhaps, other kinds of IT professionals in our midst, subject specialists. So we really are just kind of expanding where we need to go to get things done. And this all depends on your library and your programs and what it is you're trying to get done. But if you feel like you're hamstrung that someone in your professional ranks has to have the MLS, I would invite you to talk with your human resource division about that. And don't ask them. Tell them what it is you would like to explore doing. Because they don't know. They really don't necessarily know what to do there. They don't know what they know about MLS degrees is probably what we have told them about MLS degrees. So one strategy, this is kind of logically where one of the things I'm going to end up with is, load up on positions, hire as much as you possibly can. How do we change org culture? We help our existing folks evolve and adapt and see new perspectives, new values going forward. And then, of course, we are recruiting for people with some of those, if not all of those kinds of traits that we want to have in there. And again, I would say in hiring student assistants can be really, really helpful at this level too. Students, just like in the classroom affecting their faculty member, they're affecting us as well. So these are just some general kind of traits that I always throw out. These are things going forward. But it's that last bullet I put in red that I've learned over the years of hiring, and I think we have probably, in a little more than 7 years, I think we've hired more than 50 people, staff and library faculty over the years. We've had such a wave of retirement. But I've learned to try to figure out how to look for people, especially in that bottom bullet. People who are constructive, hopefully optimistic, can be a little tough at times, of course, encouraging to others around them versus judgmental, doubtful, critical. I can be any one and all of those things on any given day. I can tell you that. None of us are perfect, but this is about tendencies and kind of just the maybe second nature of how we tend to think. And if you spend enough time with people in interviews, you usually can tell and you can find out who tends to be constructive and encouraging going forward. I can't emphasize that enough. I don't really have like a great widget there, but I can tell you I like to be involved in interviews toward the end of the interview. And invariably, I always ask the candidates some kind of question like, well, you've been here all day. Tell me something you've learned about this library that you didn't know when you walked in this morning. And even that little innocuous question has been very intriguing for me because there are people, the really critical judgmental types will give you this really deep, dark critique of your library and tell you how bad it is. And yes, it happens. I see it all. I see some of you are like shaking your head or chuckling. It's like, yes, I'm amazed. If I had a recorder and if I could wipe out their name, it would be a great audio book. But then there are others who tell me about all this great stuff that they saw and all this great stuff that they learned. Now that's just a quick snapshot in time that you're getting from somebody, but it gives, for me at least, it gives you some quick initial indication. And it's not about are they right or not. Both of these people can be accurate in what it is they're saying, but it tells you something about what they choose to go with in their brain, what their, kind of what their top perspective is. So and some of both, of course, are correct. There's times and needs to be critical, as well as not so critical. So identifying adapters in your library. I think it's really important to be looking for people in your library that, as you talk about strategies and what you're trying to achieve and going forward, who are those people that are beginning to talk and speak up? Even ask questions. Maybe they don't understand what it is you're trying to do. But those who tend to start talking about things usually indicates that those are people who are definitely wrestling with the topics and trying to figure it out. I mean, so are people who are not so talkative, perhaps. But it is, look for signs, look for ways in which you can kind of tell that people, some individuals are looking for, ways to kind of grab on to those new initiatives and help drive them forward. And it's really important to identify those people and then to involve them more, incrementally empower them, help them develop and grow, because these could be people who are leading some of these initiatives or just major cogs in the wheel of your machinery in the library going forward. Another area that we've worked hard on is conducting performance reviews. And I know this sounds radical, but if I could not do it, I don't think I would do any annual performance reviews, period. How many of you have always, throughout your career, always had a great experience when you've talked about your annual personnel review with your boss? No, me neither. Yeah, see, none of us have. There's great potential for that to be a really difficult time. People walk away with a really bad taste in their mouth. They could be irritated. If there's some sort of difficulty or problem, waiting 12 months, of course, is not the time to pull this out of the hat and put it up on the table. But here again, it's all about this. Let's focus more on the future. Where are we trying to go? It's like, yes, have some brief discussions about past performance, but then begin pretty quickly to talk about, and let's talk about your work goals and where are we going in the next semester and where are we going in the next year and what do we need you to be doing this next semester to help us achieve our goals, and try to break those things down to the personal level. And again, with kind of current and past performance, it's best to really not do that once every 12 months. I mean, maybe you do something twice a year. Maybe the 6-month mark is just an informal discussion. It may not even need to be documented or written down, but make sure that you're having those kinds of talks. So these interactions turn into constructive, encouraging conversations, right? Instead of judgmental and overly critical. Of course, that last bullet, what about people who just won't adapt? That's what we really want to talk about, right? All those difficult people. Well, of course, this is the really tough topic, and I don't have a magic silver bullet here either. But I would say what has worked a lot for us is to be really respectful of all people, to listen to them, understand who seems to be kind of lagging behind or resisting. I would just kind of raise that way. Be respectful to all people. I think it's important. And if you're faking it, your employees will know. They can see it, they can feel it. So give some of these people some time and attention. Always invite them to come along with you on the work you're doing and the initiatives. Maybe they won't, but if they're not going to, it's because they choose not to, not because you're being difficult or you're developing an attitude because you're irritated with them. I mean, I'm a human being and I have a lot of colleagues. They're all human beings, and yeah, we can get frustrated with people who are really resisting, but I think it's important to understand that's going to happen. If any of us have read anything about the diffusion of innovations, we know that adoption curve. We know there is going to be those who lag behind and resist. That's always going to be part of the profile of any human organization. So respect, give some time and attention, always invite them to come along with you, really understand what their skills and experiences are, and try to find something new that they can do. Support what it is they are doing, but see if they can do something along the lines of the strategic model that you're working toward. A quick example I can tell you in our libraries, about 4 years ago, we started to change our liaison model. And we realized that as we were introducing all these new programs and services, that was causing some anxiety, certainly for the subject librarians, the liaisons, because they thought, how am I going to be an expert in research data management and publishing and rights and multimedia production, and how do I do all this stuff? As well as my subject expertise. And I think we worked together and we arrived at, well, you're not expected to be expert in all these things. It's impossible. And what a large library does, many academic and large research libraries, there's a wide variety, right? A real plethora of things that we do in our communities, in our institutions. So we've kind of developed this, the academic theme of, each subject librarian can kind of choose a major and a minor. We do instruction, we do reference, we do collection development, and we kind of threw a fourth in around scholarly communication activity. So repositing, publishing, data work, et cetera. Find one or two of those that you're going to be, that you really feels like your major. Is there another area in there that you can learn more about that kind of maybe it's your minor area that you can be helpful with? And then think about, we have kind of two model paths going forward, what we call refer and release, which means a subject librarian might work with a faculty member. Maybe it's a data issue and they don't feel like they're qualified to really handle it, so they turn it over to one of our data services people. The other model is they don't turn it over, but they bring in that data person and they're working with that data person. So now you have two people from the library working with a faculty member to try to get things done. I use data as an example because this is a lot of the work that we're doing these days. I've seen something similar around student projects and creating media for student output and what they're producing, and professional needs around multimedia design is another good example that coming out of our library. So there's a lot that's been done here. Other examples I can give you of kind of changing people, as I know, one example is when I had started, we had a cataloger who was doing reasonably well as a cataloger, but it was not this person's love whatsoever. This person's love, he had a former life in the hotel industry and traveled the world and worked all over the world, knew so many languages, I can't even count them all. And he really wanted to kind of develop this international engagement program for the library. So after about a year and a half of listening to this over and over and over, I finally said, yes, we're going to just move you. And was there some consternation in the cataloging department? Of course there was. But in the end, did they really lose a lot when they lost his production? No, they found ways to take care of it and get it covered. There are ways to do these things, and sometimes we just say we can't do that, and there were some things that they start doing less of, a little bit less checking, a little bit less hand touching of every record, so we could have an international engagement program. And I think for us, that international engagement program has worked out very well. We've had a lot of different programs and activities, and it's just an example of trying to leverage people's interests and backgrounds. And it's one of the things I love about working in libraries is so many of us come with a rich set of different kinds of backgrounds, different fields, different degrees, and the like, and it's like, how do we put some of those to use? So I'm going to stop there. Just have this slide about, these are some of the things that my library tends to concentrate on, new things. I've not talked about all of these, of course. I was trying to focus a little bit more on the leadership and personnel type matters and what you can do with money. But at this point, I can stop and take questions. I can stand here and take questions, or if you'd like, I can come down here. You kind of let me know what's going to work best for you. If we wanted to start with questions, I definitely need a microphone. It's a big room, so I could stand up here and take questions if you have any. Pat. Yeah, so you're asking about collections specifically. Yeah, so that is a very tough one. There's no doubt about it. I don't know that, here again, I don't know that I have a real tried and true way of doing it. I have felt at times, some of the budgets I've submitted, I have felt at times, I just pick up on this vibe that I wonder if some of the assistant provosts I'm working with think this inflation factor is made up or not. So I had, for a couple of years, we did just submit as an addendum to our budget. They didn't really want it, but I gave them a spreadsheet. Here it is. title by title by title or package by package as much as we possibly can. And for a couple of years, at least, we started getting the inflation factor funded, because I think that was part of it. I mean, right, us librarians, we come along and say, well, you know, it's going to go up 5%. Here's the number. And if you're somebody trying to help find money for that, you're scratching your head and you're kind of wondering, well, how real is this? So there's that aspect to it. I've done some heretical things, and one thing I probably have done that's might be kind of heretical for some of us, it was for me when I first did it, was we have what we call a critical needs budget request every year. That's what we send to the provost. What's critically needed to continue our operations. And we have to rank these in priority order. So a couple of years ago, I started putting collection inflation number 2, not number 1, because they would try to fund number 1 and nothing else. So I gambled, and I thought, are they really going to walk away completely and not fund collection inflation? And luckily the answer was no, they didn't walk away completely. So I get a position or two, I get some help with some other things, and they know they have to meet the need for the collection. So that sounds completely opposite of what should happen. But I don't know what the magic bullet is there. I don't think any of us have any. But I think it's interesting just to you know, have the person interacts with the provost's office, just try different tricks and tactics and see what reaction you get. And if something works really great year after year after year, share it with the rest of us, man, because we need it. I would say on our end, comparing ourselves to peers, that might work a little bit for Florida. It doesn't work for us because we have typically been in the bottom third of the ARL, and I've had my provosts in the past who just, you know, if we compare our budgets that way, it's just, he has literally held up his hand once to me and says, I don't want to hear that. If our people need the Journal of the American Medical Association, that's what I want to know. So I have taken advantage of that. Of course, that fellow, who is awesome, has retired. But I've kind of taken that to heart, and just like, if somebody really needs something, we're just going to stick to brass tacks and say, we need this because these people want it. Here's what's going to happen if they don't have it. So anyway, that's what we do. So.
I'm curious about your category there, research, impact, and collaboration services. And wondering, how does that play out?
Yeah, thank you. We have a new department that we formed probably a little more than a year ago called Research Collaboration and Engagement. So it's a little bit different than that phrase there. And we teach tools a lot of times. We're teaching people how to use the Open Science Framework for collaboration and research. We subscribe to the Altmetrics database, so we're teaching faculty kind of how to use that database and kind of see what their own measures look like from the kind of the non-traditional sources, social media, et cetera. You know, things like that. That group also works with faculty for the university has a research information management system called Elements from Digital Science. So this is like where all the faculty activity goes in. The provost's office uses that as the faculty activity reporting system each year. But we can help people get material into there and just kind of teach them how to use that system for their own benefit as a faculty member. So things like that. We haven't done it quite yet, but we're in the midst of trying to build research profiles for faculty members. Campus kind of wants that. Of course, nobody's really figuring out quite how to do it. Our data is coming out of this element system, so that's the other piece. Like we're beginning to teach faculty how they can steward their own research profile, or have us do it. If we can hire enough students, we would do it for everybody on campus.
Are you having your subject librarians do that work, or have you actually hired positions to
Subject librarians as much as possible. But like I said, with the liaison model I shared a little bit about, sometimes there are those who just either don't want to do it or don't really get it or feel like they don't have time. It's the time thing that might be the bigger issue. I mean, honestly, we don't really have a lot of resistors on that. People are willing to be helpful, but they do pretty quickly go to one of the people we have in research collaboration engagement to help out. We did just hire and started last month a research impact librarian position. And this position literally came out of a conversation I had with the provost about 2 years ago. And he said he really wanted somebody to help faculty understand how to use all these different varieties of impact measures on their work and how to use them to their benefit. So Mike kind of cooked this idea up for a research impact librarian, and he funded it, and we've hired. And I have had questions like, gosh, how do you find somebody like that? Well, this was a scholarly communication librarian who came from another institution who thought this would be a really cool opportunity. So we're going to try to figure out, this person's been on board 6 weeks, so we're trying to figure out, how can we go about helping faculty understand all of these measures out there and use them for their own benefit. So one person doing all that. But again, the subject librarians are very interested in this. I mean, they're engaging with that person, that research impact librarian, and they are working together and trying to figure out what can they do for their faculty. So I love to see that. I like it when we kind of have that model where we do hire kind of call it a specialist, but the engagement with the subject librarians to have any kind of critical mass is, well, critical. And we have been able to achieve that a lot. So I've been very thrilled with that. So.
You mentioned data services that you got up there. That implies to me like you have more than, I mean, I get a program on like, we have one person who's data management person that's kind of up there by himself, and we have graduating terms and that kind of stuff. Do you have multiple people dealing with data management?
We do. For us, this has truly been our #1 strategic growth area by far. We have a data services department of 8 people. And a couple provosts have helped me build that over time. So I would say in terms of what we've been doing successfully as a library, that's like the first area to point at. There's other things that we're doing. But I would say too that our experience of being successful around helping with data issues on campus leads people to think about the library for other things. We're managing the campus e-portfolio system that, again, Provost a year ago asked us if we could take this on, so we gathered a bunch of people on campus, formed a big committee of stakeholders and said, help us get this e-portfolio program off the ground. But that's not just providing technology, right? That's what maybe IT might do. But we have people who are very embedded in the pedagogical work, and so they're working with faculty. They're teaching students how to curate and showcase their works, working with faculty on how to integrate use of portfolios as assignments in their course. That too has been hugely successful for us. It's been a great story on our end. So I kind of feel like you kind of get that win in one area. It might take 5 years. You never know when that next win's going to come, but I think it helps people to see the library a little bit differently. So. Yeah, and I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Who do we collaborate most with? Depends on the issue. I'd say a lot like the e-portfolio work I just mentioned. We're very much joined at the hip with we have a vice provost for undergraduate academic affairs and our honors college. They were kind of the early guinea pigs, the honors college. They wanted to do this and work with portfolios a lot. On the data end, we work with a variety of people, but I'd say, perhaps our key collaborator is we have a group called Advanced Research Computing under the CIO. So they're the group that's doing all the computational support for modern digital research projects. But we have developed a system where we share storage. They're storing data. Not necessarily everything needs to come to us, but they know we have a data repository where we take finished data sets. But we've shared storage. We use a system together called Globus, which is a technology that helps move data kind of through the pipelines and gets it to another location. We co-fund that together. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because I would say for us as a library, if we've had any success at all, it's because we partner. We might lead and do as much as we can, but we're always looking around. We just think about stakeholders. We're going to do X. Who are the stakeholders in this thing? How do we work with them? And sometimes that works out, and sometimes it doesn't, of course. But I think I have had one associate dean who joked a couple years ago, said, we just need to do an annual report that's just a list of our partnerships. And just, what's our metric for success? Here's all these partnerships. Because we tend to work with a lot of other offices. So, and that can be hard and time consuming, and you can't do it all. So you do have to kind of, here again, kind of pick. But I like to not be the picker. I like to see, the folks in the library, the librarians and professionals who are intersecting with faculty and students, let them decide what they think is most important to do. Well, external forces. So one of them might be, okay, here's a big one, right? So universities, are we about public good or private good? Well, we all know things are leaning towards, we're about private good. We're about the individual and the private good that that person achieves by getting the degree. People want folks to graduate, get out there and get that job, to go to college to get a job. Not necessarily to get educated, but to get a job. I'd like to think both. I am a father with 5 kids, 3 bonus kids and 2 original kids, let's say. And yeah, I want them all to have jobs. So I mean, as a parent, we all want to do that. But I think that, that's an external force that changes the library. It's like, so what are we doing with students? How are we helping them do things? We know, we are responsible for the e-portfolios as a part of this, but kind of a larger digital literacy program where we are developing modules. We're teaching students, how to communicate well via the web. How do you do teamwork in a virtual community? Things like that. How do you create materials? I mean, a lot of students who walk in the library, it's, yes, we need reading material, of course, but then it's, I got to create this database, or I got to use this GIS application, or develop a website or something. So a lot of it is building skills around using digital tools that that when they graduate, they're going to go off into their work world, and they're going to need to use some of those skills and tools. So that's like one interpretation for us. That's a pretty big interpretation, but we realize we need to help students skill up to be successful in a digital economy upon graduation, in the digital workplace. We see that as information literacy is the base of that, right? I mean, that's, our information literacy program is, and we've had a very well-developed one since probably back in the mid-90s. So we see that as that's the platform by which we start developing these other perspectives. And we develop those because we're listening to other people on campus where this is a very important thing for them. So. Well, that's an excellent area to think about. I don't know that I have presented that before. I don't know if in our case, it's had much impact. I mean, what's a little on the sad side is I know ARL, the Association of Research Libraries, has tracked that over the years, maybe for the last, close to 20 years or so. And all of us in the aggregate are lower of a percentage of the university budget than we were 15 and 20 years ago. So we're a little bit shrinking. So that's a difficult one. I do think what tends to work in our case is showing numbers, expenditures divided by the number of students that we have. We're a university that's been growing a lot. Even when I arrived in 2011, we were about 28,000 students. We're probably up to about 34. And by 2022, our goal is to be 40,000 students. So yeah, Pat, we're going to look a lot more like University of Florida. We're coming. But the scary part about that is everybody thinks about, wow, we need investments in the library to handle that. But it's, no one's going to think about that for you. You have to go make those cases. So I think for us, that's helped a little bit to show, here's bigger universities, and here's what they're allocating to help their students, and a per student cost vis-a-vis the library or certain library programs. Maybe it's the collections budget. I don't know that that's resulted directly in a great acquisition on our part, but I think I definitely get people hearing that and listening to that. To kind of find what works, for you. Work with the library managers? For the library budget itself. Well, the way my university does it is the assumption, and this is a good thing, the assumption is you have the budget that you've been having. So there's that. There hasn't been an interest we haven't done like zero-based budgeting where pretend you have nothing and convince us that you need something. It's been more presume you have what you have, and what are these critical needs that you need to continue to go forward. So our focus in the library really is around these strategic items, and it really is what's important to the university. And I have had, librarians who have asked, well, how come, we need more people in instruction? How come we haven't asked for more people in our information literacy program, which I have not? And the answer is, well, I would like to do that. We want to do that. But we want, we've learned to ask for what we think will get funded. We'll ask the provost for what's important to him or her and what we can do to help that thing go along, not necessarily the library's favorite pet project. I think over time, we want those things to become the same, and I think we're getting a lot closer there in kind of in terms of our organizational culture. But we pay close attention to what it is the provost is trying to advance, and then the library comes along and says, we can help you advance your interest here by doing this thing, and we ask for that. Now, in my early days, the data stuff was, where it was all at. I started 2 months after the National Science Foundation came out with its data access policy, and the campus was kind of up in arms. What do we do? So, library to the rescue. And lately, last couple of years, it's been much more of the focus on student projects around providing e-portfolios and training and teaching there, multimedia design and production in the library, which was not in the library. It used to be in the IT division's learning technology office. So we've taken that over from them so they can focus more on faculty development and faculty teaching methods. So we focus a little more on helping students. So the last couple of years, this last year I got a position funded for a multimedia designer who's teaching students and an IT specialist to help with more technology on the floor of the library, because this digital literacy thing is a big deal for our current provost. So I could have asked for something else, but I think we knew we had a good chance of him funding this. And for the first time ever, in 1 year, I got 2 positions funded this last year. I have had 1 position funded at times, but he actually funded 2 positions and covered our journal inflation, so I was shocked. I'm sorry? Yeah. Yeah, and again, does that always work even for us? No, it doesn't always work. But I think, again, kind of in my 7 budget years, I think that has worked more than it has not worked. So if there's, perhaps there is something to that about just really trying to be really, really aligned with where the university is going. And in our sense, it is paying attention to the provost. The provost has been that voice, uses his or her bully pulpit going forward. Sometimes it's deans. Other campuses, it could be different things. There might be more focus on the deans and what it is they're saying, but I think our provost office has done a good job of representing the deans too in the aggregate. So we really try to pay attention there. So, anything else?
Do you do any cost sharing with academic departments or journals, or for example, specialized software?
Mm-hmm.
It's been very flat for a long time, and
Yeah.
how do you meet these needs, these streaming needs?
Yeah, it's hard. We've done a little bit, I would say not really around databases, but some specialized tools. We have, trying to think of some examples. Well, EndNote is something that we have shared really with the research office. We have split that bill from the beginning. We've had some databases here and there. The problem is, even though we've had some success, we might get an office to agree to launch something with us and pay for it for maybe 3 years. Of course, then the 3 years ends and they still want it and they want us to pay 100% of it. So, there's no magic way of doing it, but I think that's, we've had some luck there. We've also had some positions co-funded. I've had one position co-funded by the College of Engineering that was around data and informatics. So use of technology in research is really what we mean by informatics. And that was really great. We have a position co-funded with our Arts Center on campus. That's actually the top redhead on the right, Alice Rogers. She works in our new classroom building on campus, and it's a joint position with the Arts Center. Does exhibits, helps with technology in classes, student projects with professors in that building, and the like. So we've had some luck there where we've been sharing kind of costs for positions. We have a kind of a digital humanities program that we have. Our Liberal Arts and Human Science College has dedicated 2 postdocs to working in this program. We call it's just a space in the library. It's not really a digital humanities center like you might think of, but it's a program that helps more with education and courses in the humanities, apply technology in the courses. So that, things like that. Those things have worked out pretty well. But I like to think in my particular university, there's pretty good leadership, and there's a lot of talk between deans and the like. So we try to take advantage of that. It's, we're able to talk to a dean's office and they actually listen, as opposed to, I've had plenty of experience in the past where you call a dean's office and they hang up on you. So it's, we feel like we're in pretty good spot. But it's nice to have, good leaders that are willing to, talk with the library. But the collections end of it, yeah, I mean, some cost sharing, I think that's a technique that a lot of us have tried to use. And so I think we have had some success, but it's usually for a term. So we're kind of kicking the can down the road. The problem comes up still. Anything else? Yes. Mm-hmm. In a word, yes. We've had some significant impact, and it's risky. At times, it's like having a tiger by the tail, but we've had some very good outcomes. We have on our campus, we have a research institute called ICAT. It's the Institute for Creativity, Arts, and Technology, and they have 3 small studios in the library. It's an art and animation studio, a sound recording studio that has many, many seats. There's like 30 seats, and it's all a computer and a keyboard everywhere you go. And then a small, like viewing, almost like a small cinema, a small viewing room. They use those during the day, and then they're open evenings and weekends, and we have staff available to help people with some of the technology in those rooms. We have built a scale-up classroom with our College of Sciences, who is looking for space to do a second one, and we were clearing space in our basement. So we now have a classroom that they paid 80% for, and we get about 40% of the time. And it's interesting to see, in a more project, kind of a problem-based learning environment in the sciences, but we tend to lend out our time to other colleges on campus to see what's it like to do problem-based learning if you're the history department or the political science department. And then we work with them. And our requirement is, we'll let you use the room, but you have to involve your librarian. No plans involve the librarian, then sorry, we can't help you. But there's things like that. It's when there are current issues, we've cleared our 4th floor, and we've been waiting for a year now to get clearance to begin the renovation. So that's been the dangerous part. I've had offices come to campus, come to the library and say, oh, you got all this room on your 4th floor. We want to do this, do that. And I've had to fend some of those off, and it's not so easy. So anyway, I think we've had some very good stories, but you got to be a little careful about what you're doing with your space and who learns about it and what you're doing. And then internally, there is, in our early days, this happened, but certainly not so much now. But, in the beginning, there was concerns about, oh, we're giving up, we're giving up space to the College of Science. Here again, I listened to that and tried to be respectful and understand that. I understand that's what it looks like. And it was one of those things until the classroom got built and we're co-teaching and spending a lot of time ourselves in that classroom, nobody talks about it that way anymore. Oh, well, this is a partnership with the College of Science. So it's hard. Sometimes it's not until something new actually happens and you can kind of see it and engage in it, you see the benefit. At the beginning, it just looks like, oh, we're just giving up space. Anything else? No? Okay. Well, you've all had great questions. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And I hope some of this has been helpful to you. If you have any questions or anything afterward, I'm happy to stick around and take any other comments you might have. But thank you.